Hi everyone. In this video, I'd like to take a look at finding confidence intervals for a proportion. When we have a sample that we're asking and our statistic is a proportion rather than a mean or anything or a standard deviation. So the terms and the symbols that you're going to recognize, the symbol P is going to represent the population proportion. The P hat, as it's called, will be representing the sample proportion. P hat, of course, the proportion is X divided by N. How many satisfy the requirement over the total? Q hat is the complement of P hat. It's going to be what it doesn't satisfy the value. N is the number of sample values, and E is the margin of error, or sometimes in books they call it MOE. The Z alpha over 2 is the critical value that separates the area between the right tail and the standard on the standard normal curve. To find a confidence interval, as explained in the original, we're going to take the P hat, which is our point estimate, and subtract the margin of error from it to get the lower limit. We will take the point estimate P hat and add the margin of error to it to get the upper limit. Now the formula for the E is this. We're going to, however, use Excel. And so I'm going to be using the tab here, Z interval prop, and I'm going to go through an example and show you how to use it. So here I have a Gallup poll of 1,487 adults showed 43% of respondents have a Facebook page. The sample results, N equals 1,487 and P hat was 43. I want a margin of error that corresponds to the 95% confidence level. I want the interval estimate for the proportion. And then I want to answer some other questions. So I'm going to start here by constructing a confidence interval that we know P hat and we know E. Well, where did this all come from? Well, it came from Excel. So I put into, now I want to explain the Excel. Anything that's in green you could type into. If it isn't in green, don't touch it because it has formulas in it. Now, a side note here, okay? If the P hat is known, if that's given to you, then you can actually type it in and then you can state what N is, and you can calculate X, which I did here, by taking P hat percentage times the total to get what the X is. If you know X and N, you can type those values in and it will calculate P hat. So you have to do a little bit, and I made some notes here to the side. In this case, I knew P hat, so I put the 43% in here, okay? And I knew N was 1487, so I wrote that in there. And everything else is going to be calculated. Notice if I change that number, everything else changes. Okay, so 1487 goes in here. The confidence level I want is 95%. If I want a 90% confidence interval, I would change that to 0.90. And it would change my critical value. Remember I told you the critical values in the last, that there were set critical values. Well, if you have anything other than that, this will do the calculations for you as well. Okay. Margin of error, that's the formula that I just gave you, but you don't need to use it again. It's been written here, and if you want to think about it, take a look at the formula and then look at how it was written in Excel. There's the formula for the margin of error. Okay, if they want the standard deviation of P hat, there's calculated here if a question asks that. The lower and the upper limit are then calculated by taking P hat plus the margin of error to get the upper limit and P hat minus the margin of error to get the lower limit. So when I have this, these are my values. I round them to 3 places, don't round until the very end, and I'm good to go. Okay, and what I'm saying is I'm 95% confident that the true proportion of the population falls between these two values. Based on the confidence interval obtained, does it appear that fewer than 50% adults have Facebook pages? Well, the interval values were from 45 to 45. This was obviously taken at a much earlier date. And the interval is definitely below 50%. So would you appear that they're less than 50%? Yeah, you probably would make that conclusion. Okay. Now, in the reverse, can I pick the right sample size to make sure that I catch the population proportion? Yes, I can. What I can do is I can take the formula and I can estimate. Now, if I know the standard P value, I can plug it in here. If I don't have an estimate, I assume P hat is unknown. This should say unknown. If I don't know the P hat, then I assume P hat is 50-50 and I can plug it in here. My Excel spreadsheet, you will find, again, I'm looking at the Z interval. Down here, I just put my confidence interval in here and substitute my values, and I can get my I put in my margin of error, and I can get my values. Let me take a look. So if I scroll down here, I put my confidence interval in, it will calculate that. What P hat do I know? If I don't know the P hat, I'll put in a 0.5, and it tells me that given a confidence interval of this and a P hat of this and a margin of error of 3, I need 1,067 samples. Now, do not stay with 1,067. I need a minimum of 0.11. So therefore, the minimum sample size in this example that I just did would be 1,068. Always round up. This is one of the cases where you don't follow the normal rounding rules. You will always round up. Okay? And there's a statement on that. Okay? So an example, we've got a person who wants to calculate here. Assume the recent poll showed 80% of adults make online purchases. Assume that we have no prior suggestion of possible values. So I can plug in, okay, if I have no possible values, but I want a margin of error of 3%, there's my values. Okay? And I just showed you that in Excel. 95%, P hat, I put in a 50%. Now, if I had some prior historical probabilities to deal with, I would put those in. That would change my minimum sample size. But again, always round up. Okay? Thank you.